It was the shot heard around the world. Many of us are still reeling, trying to process the gravity of what happened over the weekend. Our former president came within inches of being, maybe less than that, of being assassinated. Emotions are high, and we need to come together with a goal in mind to uncover the truth about what happened and hold those accountable who are responsible. I'm Christy Lee, and you're watching The Counter Narrative.
Side.
You know, I usually end my shows with a verse, but I feel like I need to meet the moment and start with the first one that came to mind as I watched that first video for the first time that we showed you at the beginning of the show. I got choked up seeing that. Seeing Trump fall after gunshots rang out and then rise back up to show courage under literal fire. It was just so powerful. I've had my criticisms of Trump, but watching that, it was truly presidential and courageous. And I couldn't help but think of this verse that you see on your screen from Isaiah 54:17. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is from me. I firmly believe that what we saw over the weekend was divine intervention on behalf of President Trump. Now, is Trump a perfect person? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's criticisms that are very fair and that we've covered on the show. But I do not know, again, how you can see that video and not know that divine intervention protected President Trump. I got a text from my daughter that seemed pretty profound coming from a teenager. She said, "I'm sick and tired of living through historical moments. Can we just live in a world where killing people because we don't agree with them politically isn't a normal thing?" Again, that's from a 16-year-old perspective, and I think it's interesting to hear the perspective of our young ones. But yeah, there's been a lot of historical moments she's already lived through, and she's just sick of it and realizes, what kind of world are we living in? This is definitely a spiritual battle, which we're going to make sure we do not ignore throughout the show today. Trump's courage in the face of adversity continues with no interruption, though, to his schedule. He's continuing to be courageous. On Truth Social, he wrote, "Based on yesterday's terrible events, I was going to delay my trip to Wisconsin and the Republican National Convention by 2 days, but have just decided that I cannot allow a shooter or potential assassin to force change to scheduling or anything else. Therefore, I will be leaving for Milwaukee as scheduled." In light of his near-death experience, he says he will have an entirely different speech at the RNC convention this week than previously planned. That's according to the Washington Examiner. He says this is a chance to bring the whole country, even the whole world, together. And instead of focusing on Biden and his failed policies, he will focus on unity. I'm sure his experience is giving him a whole new outlook on things, just how close he came to death that day. Watch this. You can see just a quick head tilt that saved him. There he is talking, just a quick head tilt. And you can see with that diagram just how close we came to Trump being assassinated. Again, I don't know how you can explain that without divine intervention. Early Sunday morning, Trump posted on Truth Social that it was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening and that he would fear not. And if you're familiar with the Bible, you know that fear not is in the Bible 365 times. It's truly alarming that there was no comment from President Biden for hours after the assassination attempt. And even then, he refused that evening to call it an assassination attempt. He and others feigning condemnation of violence are responsible for inciting that violence. As recently as July 8th, Biden had told donors on a call that it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. Now, just a reminder that Trump is being investigated for incitement by telling Capitol attendees on January 6th to go peacefully and patriotically. But Biden says it's time to put Trump in the bullseye, and Trump was nearly assassinated. Will there be an investigation into why he chose that wording, why President Biden chose that wording to literally put Trump in the bullseye and Trump was just nearly assassinated? Biden is also responsible for refusing extra security detail for Trump, and at last check still hasn't given his other opponent, RFK Jr., Secret Service protection, but we're going to cover that more in detail later on. Now, here's Biden addressing the nation in light of the assassination attempt. Watch this.
We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers.
Now, of course, that was just a portion of, I believe it was around 6-minute speech that he gave. But that portion there really stuck out to me because he's calling Corey, a man who died over the weekend. He was so excited. You can see the posts being excited. His daughter said he was so excited to go to this rally, support the president, support his convictions, and then killed. He was killed over the weekend, just unexpectedly, going to a rally. And you have a president calling him a hero who shelters his family from harm. But you know what would have made that better received is if he had apologized for calling him and others with opposing viewpoints MAGA extremists. In 6 minutes, 6+ minutes, he couldn't muster an apology for raising the temperature. Now they're saying it needs to be lowered. You raised it. You called half the country, potentially more than half the country, MAGA extremists, a threat to democracy, painting them as evil people, and now you want to call them a hero? Hero who sheltered his family? It's not going to sit well if you're not going to apologize. He also followed up with more lies, trying to equate the Whitmer kidnapping and January 6th with Trump's attempted assassination, which is just absolutely vile. And then there's media lapdogs who are responsible for pushing the extremist narratives and then leave it to them to downplay a major historical event. Just look at these kinds of headlines. Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises. Startles former president. Accident as Trump falls during rally. Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally. You have Washington Post with this ridiculous headline next. Trump escorted away after loud noises at Pennsylvania rally. Seriously? These are your headlines? And you have to ask yourself, whether you like Trump or not, I mean, come on. Look at this objectively. Would the media have responded with these headlines right away if this had happened to President Biden? No, it would be 24/7 coverage of a historical event, Trump or Biden nearly assassinated. This is so obvious. And trust me, you just do not hate the lying media enough. Watch this.
Also, George, we have to point out, no matter who the shooter, what the shooter's motives were, no matter who the shooter is, you are going to hear conspiracy theories going forward.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. He said he was partly joking and that was taken out of context. But those are indeed his words. And you have heard it from supporters as well. And supporters are certainly in some parts angry. And let's remember January 6th. In so many ways for the campaign, January 6th will probably be in the background after yesterday's event. This is a very difficult.
Yeah, speaking of January 6th, let's remember January 6th and how that was covered. I mean, can you believe this? Victim blaming. He was just nearly killed. And you're basically saying it was his and his supporters' fault. Sounded like those examples were more like predictions to me. And look what happened. Again, let's remember January 6th and your reporting and so many of the other in the legacy media. If January 6th was worse than 9/11 and a deadly insurrection, and those were headlines, immediate headlines, remember, why did the legacy media report at worst that Trump fell? Trump was injured, or at best, apparent assassination. Those were the first headlines we saw. It was a deadly assassination attempt, as in an innocent attendee died, unlike the lie the cops died on January 6th. It's in your face. They sensationalized January 6th, lied about January 6th, they did it immediately, and yet, they had restraint suddenly when a historical event of a former president being nearly killed. And now they want to show restraint and they want to avoid language like that, jumping to conclusions, things like that. Didn't do that with January 6th. Yes, let's remember January 6th. Speaking of that, the legacy media has largely ignored the injured and the hero who died on July 13th. They've largely ignored it with talking points like you just heard. There was a letter from the man that was killed, Corey Comparator. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but a letter came and I just couldn't help but weep as I read this. Yesterday, time stopped, and when it started again, my family and I started living a real-life nightmare. What was supposed to be an exciting day that we had all looked forward to, especially my dad, turned into the most traumatizing experience someone could imagine. And she goes on from there and she says, the media will not tell you that he died a real-life superhero. They're not going to tell you how quickly he threw my mom and I to the ground. They're not going to tell you that he shielded my body from the bullet that came at us. He loved his family. He truly loved us enough to take a real bullet for us. As with most of the chaos in the world today, we cannot miss the moment of the spiritual element to all of this. It is wild this was prophesied just about 3 months ago. Watch this.
All throughout America, and I saw Trump rising up, and then I saw an attempt on his life. This bullet flew by his ear, and it came so close to his head that it busted his eardrum. And I saw he fell to his knees during this time frame, and he started worshiping the Lord. He got radically born again during this time frame. I'm talking. People say he's saved now, but he becomes really on fire for Jesus, for what I saw coming. And then I saw people interceding when I saw him winning the presidency through great, the Lord showed me it would go clear into the summer. Great persecution would come on him through the judges and through the law and all these people trying to sue him and all this stuff. But there would be a stop to it, and things would start to break free come toward the fall. And then I saw him winning the election through the Patriots coming out and voting.
Now, he was spot on with the first part of that. I mean, that's pretty remarkable that was prophesied to that degree of what actually happened. Now, hopefully, the second part of that there will be a radical change in Trump and on fire for Jesus. Hopefully that will be the case, because there will be more attempts. And the same agency that's responsible for the kidnapping, entrapment, Whitmer hoax, a failure to find the pipe bomb, the hiding of Hunter Biden's laptop, and harassment of whistleblowers is taking over the case. We're talking about the FBI taking over the investigation next with FBI whistleblower Steve Friend. But first, let's hear from our sponsors that make this show possible.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
I don't know about you, but I have to have that cup of coffee in the morning. And Kingdom Cup is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, and it is organic. It's got this flavor that is delicious. You don't even have to put cream or sweetener in it.
Why did we go with the bean form, the whole bean? Because ultimately the powder form is the one that gathers the most moisture. And that means the more potential mold development. This is actually organic, mold-free, certified. That's important because ultimately people drink coffee, it's cultural. And so we tried to meet the culture where it is and create a healthy alternative.
Make the healthy choice for you and your family. Try mold-free, pesticide-free, and it's organic. Delicious Kingdom Cup coffee. And it's available now at the Patriot TV store. Go to patriot.tv and click on store. You'll find Kingdom Cup coffee in the health and wellness section. Order Kingdom Cup coffee at the Patriot TV store now.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Definitely inspiring. It's always good when you can be inspired by a leader of your nation. And, you know, in that prophecy, I'm still thinking about that. He said that there would be a stop to the relentless attacks on Trump at some point. And I got to say, you know, just find out today, breaking news, that Judge Cannon has dismissed the case against Trump because Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. So we'll see what happens with that. But so far, that has been dismissed. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these other attacks. Now, before I move on, I just want to remind you that if you go to patriot.tv/counter-narrative, patriot.tv/counter-narrative, you can get directly taken to a page for this show. And from there, you can actually scroll down. You'll see options to become a member of the Patriot Defender subscription club. Number of options here. You can pay $9.99 a month or save even more with a 1 year or a 2 year member subscription. And that's going to give you access to all of the former shows and other exclusives on Patriot.tv, everything that there is to offer there. But more importantly than all of that, it's going to help support me personally and this network personally if you go ahead and subscribe. So please sign up there right on that Counter Narrative landing page. That's what's going to help support this show in particular. And so again, that's patriot.tv/counter narrative. So again, we're covering we're covering the historical and alarming assassination attempt of former President Trump over the weekend. There's no question there was incitement for this to happen, and there were major security failures. Fortunately, we have the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI, going to be taking this investigation over. Do you think they'll get to the bottom of what happened? Well, let's hear from a former agent, FBI whistleblower Steve Friend. He's also host of True Blue, that's also right here on Patriot TV. So thank you so much, Steve, for coming on. I'm really interested to hear your insights on this. Man, what a weekend, right?
Yeah, I don't know what you were doing all weekend long. I just kind of like hung around the house, watched some Jumanji with the kids. Nothing really to report back, just ready for a case of the Mondays.
Right. Yeah, no, it was a lot to keep up with. Hard to try and bring everything together concisely and make sense of everything, especially when you're sifting. You know, I know you as well as I do. We have to sift through both sides, if you will. We have to look at what the mainstream is saying, and then we have to look at the counter narrative like this show and try and dig into the truth. And so that's time consuming. It's not necessarily easy. But you have an interesting perspective because in addition to being on the FBI before, you spent many years in law enforcement, and so you have a different perspective on all of these elements, the security elements and everything. So we're already seeing that Secret Service is blaming local law enforcement. You were in local law enforcement. What's your take on that?
It's the same song over and over again. Look, the federal law enforcement arm of the United States government likes to, as they say, liaise with their local partners. But what that essentially means, from an FBI perspective, is that they adopt cases that are very easy, that they can just take off their hands and then claim credit for. And similarly, when things go boom and there's got to be some sort of accountability, it's a really easy punching bag to just throw it on the local yokels, the Keystone Cops. They clearly don't have the training that we have. Who are the big bad FBI? I mean, we send agents to training for 16 whole weeks now, which is roughly half of what you need to become a barber. But the FBI and other agencies like it look for a nice punching bag to throw all the blame at here. But to your early point about my background, look, I was a local cop. I was a federal agent for the FBI. I have actually training and experience in protective details, done some protective details with the Attorney General, with the director of the FBI. And there was some significant questions and possible catastrophic security failures that happened over the weekend that need to be investigated. And I do not have trust that the FBI is going to carry that forward, because they've been proven to have meddled in presidential elections. It's very clear that President Trump has been the subject of investigation, so they're hardly impartial as it goes. And then just even outside of any sort of politics, the FBI deemed the congressional baseball shooter not an assassination attempt. They said that was suicide by cop. So I don't think they're the legitimate arm that needs to be taking this up.
That's such a great point, and one that I had actually forgotten. So thank you for bringing that up. So they have a history of downplaying this, as the media we saw do right away. I think it's important to note for the average viewer that might be upset, why is Secret Service like turning this over to the FBI? That part of the element of it is standard procedure, is it not?
Yes, there is actually legal precedent. The FBI has a mandate to investigate certain things solely. It's solely within their purview. And one of them is assassination attempts. Other things would be like serial killers or something to that effect. That's why you can get like a television show, Criminal Minds. But this actually should fall to the FBI by legal statute. But that doesn't preclude appointing an independent investigation that can run parallel to what the FBI does. And that's actually what I would like to see the House Republicans use in the upcoming budget fight. They could leverage this and say, we want to fund a special investigation to go along, because frankly, we don't trust what the FBI is going to do. They're not going to be transparent. They're going to hide things in evidence for years on end. I think we're far more likely to find out who the January 6th pipe bomber was before getting any sort of manifesto from this person, as is evidenced from the Covenant Christian shooting in Nashville, which is still under seal.
And I mean, that's reminiscent what we're talking about of the clip that we saw earlier of them saying, oh, there's going to be conspiracies that come out from this whole thing, and they will try it, that to say that it's a conspiracy, that the FBI is not suitable for this with the history. But the facts show that they do have a clear history of burying evidence. They buried the evidence of Hunter Biden's laptop and ran out the clock, so some certain things couldn't be pursued when it came to that. They are unable to answer questions when it came to the pipe bomber, as you said. Just everybody else could be tracked down with their cell phone data, but this person, something went wrong. Oh, okay. There's all kinds of evidence of them being a corrupted agency, and we can get into that more in a bit. But let's talk about the possible special committee. We had a January 6th committee formed after January 6th to investigate what went down. How would a committee or an independent investigation, what would that look like? Would it be similar to that if we're able to get that approved? Who would be on that? Do you have any insight you can share about how that would work?
They would actually have to open up the purse strings, unlike what they did, I think, really with this weaponization subcommittee under the House Judiciary. It's really been understaffed and under-resourced, and they just don't have the bandwidth to take on all the necessary interviews and investigative leads that they've gotten on the various forms of weaponization. But that's a pretty broad subject. Like, this is a pretty particular incident that happened. It shouldn't require that much. I mean, you have guys like me and other whistleblowers that have been sitting idly for 2 years and have a decade and a half of investigative experience. I'd be happy to take that up. I'd be happy to take that up for $1. I wouldn't cost the American taxpayer anything. I would just do it out of patriotic duty. You just need people who are impartial and willing to be transparent through the entire process. There's no expectation of privacy from this would-be assassin. He's no longer with us. So we don't need to worry about due process rights. We need to get to the bottom of what his motivations were and how these security failures actually happened. And the only way to do that is to ask people the questions, and not the people that are going to go in front of a congressional committee and say, look, I can't comment on an ongoing investigation. We don't want to reveal sources and methods. We need to open up the books. And there needs to be some leverage used here by the House Republicans in order to do that they've frankly been unwilling to use before. They seem to always side on, we would rather avoid a temporary partial government shutdown than actually be honest and truthful with the American public and hold the really guilty parties accountable.
Now, you make a great point there as well. Like, even if we do get a special committee and we're able to call up people like Cheadle, the head of security appointed by Biden, could she just cap her way out through that and say, can't talk about current investigation? I mean, like, would it even be worth it at this point? I mean, there's definitely questions that need to be asked even about her appointment and her political leanings, and if this could have contributed to the gross negligence of giving the president the security he needed, correct?
Yes, and if there's any sort of past performances that would indicate some sort of future testimonies, we see Christopher Wray, who's gone in there continually in the past and say, look, I can't comment on that. This is an ongoing investigation. I don't want to reveal sources and methods. The fact of the matter is that Congress has oversight authority and responsibility over all of these agencies because they control the power of the purse strings. That is why controlling the House of Representatives is so important. But when you have Christopher Wray or any other director of an agency or a cabinet level secretary just sort of flaunt in front of these committees and say, look, I'm not going to answer that, there's just never been any follow through on accountability. Christopher Wray got up in front of a Senate committee and said, I have to catch a jet and fly on vacation to northern New York. It's the FBI jet. It leaves whenever he wants, but he acted like he had to catch a Southwest flight. This is just the hubris that we've seen under the Biden administration and all of their apparatchiks that work within the government on full display. And they really have no reason to be fearful of the House Republicans because they're never held to account and they just continue to be fully funded year after year through every single budget fight.
There absolutely needs to be an independent investigation, no question. I mean, it's glaringly obvious that there's a conflict of interest, even with the fact of what Trump is on record saying. You know, he has concerns with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. There's been talk about dissolving it altogether. And now you've put this very agency in charge of investigating an assassination attempt on his life. I mean, that's just in your face, a conflict of interest. Others have raised concern about the fact how the FBI was used with his raid on Mar-a-Lago, some taking it as far as to say that the protocols in play there itself could have gotten him assassinated because they were approved to bring armor. I know that there's been a lot of confusion about that accusation. Can you shed some light on that?
I can. And look, there is a use of force policy that exists within the FBI and within all law enforcement agencies. And what people have to remember is that it is always in effect. It doesn't matter if you're a beat cop riding around in your patrol car, if you're eating lunch, if you're at home sitting on the couch, if you've been issued a weapon and a firearm from the government, there's a use of force policy in effect at all times. So when you have a authorization of use of force within an operations plan, it's just restating it. It's actually sort of a CYA. So if something were to happen, which is why the raid was wholly inappropriate, because it raised the likelihood of something bad happening, like a shooting situation, then there's going to be an investigation. And the first question they're going to ask is, when was the last time that you were briefed on the use of force policy? And that way you can say, well, I was briefed this morning at the raid. And that way, if it's a bad shoot, they can say, hey, we told you this morning. We just gave you that reminder, even though you've been trained on this throughout your entire career. This is not really the issue that I think is worth focusing on with the Mar-a-Lago raid, because they brought the additional elements there, the tactical elements, the hostage rescue team. That's the most elite tactical unit within the FBI. That's like the Navy SEALs of the FBI. Why was that necessary? Was that because they thought there was a likelihood that the regular agents were going to be a little bit trigger happy and they wanted the most trained guys there because they know they'd be a little bit more disciplined on that? Well, that's a question about your regular agent population. If hostage rescue team was necessary to go down there, then what was the threat level? I mean, the area was protected by Secret Service. Now we got questions about Secret Service's ability to do that protection, but at the time we didn't have that. And then there's other things like the fact that it was a search team from Washington, D.C., where the investigation was being carried forward, even though that was in the Miami's area of responsibility. It's a simple public corruption case. But this was a counterintelligence squad of agents that was flown at the American taxpayers' expense to carry forward a search down at Mar-a-Lago. And what's very unusual about that is that's up to the discretion of the special agent in charge of Miami to actually allow that to happen. Now, the final question is, why would that individual, whose name was George Pirro, allow that to happen? I mean, this is a search on a former president. This is something you can stake your entire career on, and yet he gave that up to another squad entirely from a distant office. Well, could it be because George Pirro was compromised? He is. Spoiler alert, he was demoted to run the Miami office after there were some sexual escapades within the FBI. These are the sort of things that I've tried to bring out to the public awareness and even to the Trump legal defense team on this, because there are significant questions about this raid. But, you know, as we have now seen this dismissal, I guess it's all for naught, and there was much ado about nothing. There's a lot of infighting that went on about it. I'm just kind of relieved to put that in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I mean, man, now that this has been dismissed, it'll be interesting to see the ripple effects and how this may come back into the spotlight once again and take another look at that. But you mentioned, you know, that you're committed to exposing the truth, to transparency as a former FBI agent. So just want to remind our viewers that you can get more of Steve Friend on this network 2 to 2:30 Eastern right here on Patriot TV Monday through Friday. But let's just cut to the chase to kind of start to wrap this up. FBI now investigating this assassination attempt that took forever for them to even call an assassination attempt. As a former agent, what confidence do you have that we'll get some very real answers on all of these security failures?
I have zero confidence in the FBI. The magnanimous way that they've gone about and carried themselves is completely fake. This image that they've portrayed, and really largely from pop culture and TV and movies about being uber competent, they're not filled with very qualified investigators by and large. And they've made no secret about that. They're recruiting people now who have no experience in law enforcement. Unlike me, who came in with that background, they're going after people that the Judiciary Committee has exposed are baristas. And recently they hired someone who was a heroin addict to be an agent in Washington, D.C. These are the sorts of people. I saw today from the social media content that the FBI puts out daily, where they try to take credit for cases they haven't really worked. But today they want to celebrate more of the LGBTQ plus rainbow kamikaze coalition that exists within their workforce, 1.7%. That's really what they're focused on, because they're not really interested in doing the federal law enforcement investigations that we expect that they do. They're not destroying the FBI. They're just building a new one that's going to target people that they deem to be politically problematic, which is what I've been screaming from the mountaintops for the last 2 years about, that this is a woke and weaponized agency that can frankly only be scattered to the winds after being shattered into a million pieces. That's the only way we can go about it, because the necessary reforms to bring it back from the brink are so voluminous that just starting all over or making those reforms at 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, your viewpoint is so critical on this, and just want to thank you again, as always, for the bravery and speaking out. You know, many of our lives changed dramatically. You know, mine as well, probably not to the degree yours has, but it's really inspiring to see that Steve has written a book, True Blue: My Journey from Beat Cop to Suspended FBI Whistleblower, where you can read more of his personal story. And he's doing his show right here on Patriot.tv, Monday through Friday, 2 to 2:30 Eastern, True Blue. But thank you again, Steve, for your commitment to truth.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
You bet. All right, turning our attention to these security failures in more detail, we're going to be digging in with former Marine combat vet Alfredo, or Alpha Luna of Alpha Warrior. But first, let's take a quick moment to hear from our sponsors that make this show possible.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0. When I invented My Pillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. My Pillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature regulating thread. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
Now's the time to go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use the promo code to save 50% on your My Pillow 2.0. Not only that, for a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
mypillow.com.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Well, something is fishy. Way to state the obvious, right? I mean, my goodness. There were massive security failures that led to our former president and current GOP candidate coming within inches of his life. We must not forget that not only did the fake news media and Democrats incite violence, but they would have left him with zero security. Remember when Benny Thompson said, he just said over the weekend that there is no room in American democracy for political violence. He's grateful for law enforcement's fast response to this incident and is glad the president is safe. His thoughts and prayers go out to everyone involved. He and others sending out similar messages. Do you believe him? But yeah, it was Benny Thompson who had proposed legislation that would have removed Secret Service protection from President Trump altogether. There are many questions about what seems like an intentional failure by the Secret Service. Didn't have. Here's a former U.S. sniper on the attempt on Trump's life. Watch this.
Until the investigation is over. But the bottom line is that if you saw someone climbing onto a roof that you hadn't authorized any clearance on, it's got a clear line of sight. It's exactly adjacent to the shooting where the president was sitting. And you're talking about a pop shot and you got people yelling and there should have been comms. The minute that local law enforcement, who apparently had a rifle pointed on, there should have been an emergency frequent comms channel that they could have said, we have a shooter on the roof. Secret Service should have rushed the stage and immediately took the president and took him off and then responded with the counter sniper. The shot should not have gone off. That is the failure in itself. You're supposed to be able to try and, the best security is when you go in and you're actually able to prevent an incident, not react to an incident. Even if you would have left a law enforcement officer's patrol car in that parking lot with the lights on, that could have been a deterrent. But when you have nothing that is actually showing force protection, you're encouraging this. Look, I'm not sure about who the individuals are on the individual detail Secret Service, but I can tell you under this Biden administration, the one thing I've seen is massive DEI hires. And I can tell you, when you primarily go after DEI, you end up with DIE.
Ain't that the truth? Well, here to discuss is Alfredo Luna. He is also known as the Alpha Warrior, host of the Alpha Warrior Show. He has a wealth of experience as a combat veteran Marine. He also spent a decade and a half in law enforcement, including serving as a gang detective and in undercover operations. He's earned awards from Congress, the FBI, and even the prestigious Law Enforcement Medal of Valor. Thank you so much, Alpha Warrior, for coming on the show with me to discuss I don't know about you, but I didn't get a whole lot of sleep this weekend, so I'm kind of stumbling over my words today. There was just so much information to take in, such a pivotal moment in history that we had to witness. I'm very anxious to hear your thoughts on this.
No, absolutely, and thank you for having me and sharing, this time with your audience. And yeah, I didn't get a whole lot of rest. I feel like we never had a Monday. It just feels like the last week just got extended. There's a lot that's happened. There's a lot of theories that are out there, and so let me start with first. My heart goes out to Corey, the gentleman that was killed, the American that was there just trying to have a good time with his family, celebrate freedom, and support President Trump. And we lost that American, and I don't want anything to be taken away from that loss. But one of the concerns that I have is, I've had an opportunity to be a part of these details for both when it was President Obama, also when it was President Trump. I've done it on the law enforcement side, and I've also had an opportunity to do it on the contracting side when I did canine explosive handlings for presidents. And I can speak to California because that's where I've done these details. I haven't done it in every state, but the partnerships and relationships I have with officers across the country, that I've talked to, all kind of share the same perspective of what I've seen. And what happened on Saturday with the assassination attempt on President Trump, it's really hard for me to swallow it as a failure. And I'll explain what I mean by this. And I understand that we see all these, cataclysmic mistakes, and we're like, well, absolutely, there's a failure, Alpha. What are you talking about? And these operation plans, the one thing that's there, and sometimes, especially in law enforcement, we get frustrated with this is the redundancy. And then we have redundancies for the redundancies and for the redundancies. And yes, it's to make sure that whatever VIP you're in charge of protecting is safe. It's to make sure the public's safe. But at the core, the real reason there's so many redundancies, and Steve kind of touched on this earlier, is it's CYA. These agencies want to make sure there's no liability, and that's why they want to make sure all this stuff's covered. And even if you had a rookie agent that was in charge of putting this operation plan together and didn't do real-time aerial photos of the area they're protecting, even if they just went to Google Maps, one of the things that you can easily tell is the building structures that were off to President Trump's right, where this assassination suspect was located. And in addition to that, you see a tall, what looks like a water tower that's there. Why were men not positioned here? These are just basic oversights that, like I said, even a rookie operational planner would have seen and would have done. But not only in the video, we see the sniper team that's there, but people have to understand there's also other counter sniper teams that are there, and their fields of fire are going to overlap. And once again, why are they going to overlap? Because of redundancy. But in addition to covering the rooftops or the high elevation areas that are a threat, you're going to have your local law enforcement, because there's multiple agencies here. It's not just going to be like Butler's, police departments. You're going to have allied agencies there. You're going to have sheriffs there. You're going to have the state police that's going to be there. You have multiple agencies that are going to be involved with this. And you're going to have, even if, and I know they have the public information officers that came out and said, well, that was considered outside of the perimeter. I'm going to call BS on that. Absolutely. Especially when you look from an aerial view, there's not a whole lot of things that are there. That's a very obvious immediate threat. So the floor of that, you're going to have ground officers, the access points to those buildings. You're going to have officers that are tasked with, covering that area. And you're going to have met with the owners of these buildings, and if these buildings have their own security, you're going to have met with them days in advance, including not just that day. Because on that day, all these agencies that are coming together are going to come at a 0300, 0400 morning briefing to everybody, covers it, who's on what channel, who's working where. There's a lot that goes there. So for the rooftop to not be covered, for the access point for the roof to not be covered, for this man to have gone to that point, whether he showed up with the rifle or whether the rifle was pre-positioned there days before, these are all things that would have been caught. And so the reason I struggle with calling it a failure is because in order for that many things to go wrong, that means people had to intentionally and purposely make sure that those specific areas weren't covered, because you just don't not cover that by accident because of all the redundancies. And so one of the main issues I have is people need to be able to see, or in this investigation, they need to be able to see these operational plans and what happened that these points of access, somebody wasn't there. Who made the decision that these things were not going to be covered that ultimately led what we saw unfold?
Well, I mean, that is why this is reeking of an inside job, because it's hard to explain away so many failures. And you can show some of these articles, if you'd like. Well, I'm talking about them, but there's a lot of articles coming out right now that say sources revealed that the rooftop where the gunman was shot was deemed a security vulnerability before the rally. There's reports of this individual who I haven't even named this entire show because this reeks of an inside job so much. I don't want to just only focus on this 20-year-old. I don't even care what his name is. Like, let's get to the bottom of what truly happened here. But there's reports of him being by the I can't say that word, magnetrometers or something, and acting strangely. How did he get a ladder? How is that not noticed? I mean, there's just so many glaring questions. And then you have the blame game on top of everything else. Like, you're right to point out that there's several agencies, but what's the excuse for not proper communication? What's the excuse for Secret Service not making sure, since that's their one job, to make sure that they are protecting the president, that they weren't communicating with police and ensuring that the rooftop was safe? I mean, there's just way too many questions, right?
Absolutely. And, especially when I was doing the contracting side of this, when we're for presidents at speaking arrangements and conferences, Secret Service knows everything that the local PD is doing. They have the operational plans of the local PD. So it's not like you can't pass off the buck here and say, oh, it's local PD's fault, because you're aware of their operational plans. You're aware of their staffing plans. Secret Service knows the roster of every single cop that's working. And I would imagine that's because they're probably vetting the cops that are working. So for Secret Service to say, hey, it's these guys, that's not going to happen. There was times, as the K9 team on a contracting part, where we would have a Secret Service agent that was tasked to be with us just to make sure that things were covered the way they were supposed to. So this is not just Secret Service passing it off. This is Secret Service trying to discount the fact that even if this area was particularly tasked by just local PD, Secret Service still has a responsibility of oversight for what they're doing.
Now, I'm sure you saw the report that a local police officer had actually climbed a ladder onto the roof after being alerted by multiple people that there was a gunman on the roof or something was going on up there, that he actually did climb up onto the roof and came face to face with the suspect, Crooks, who pointed a rifle at him, and he went back down the ladder. And then that's when the shots started to come at President Trump, and ultimately took the life of Corey, injuring others. This is already garnering some Uvalde comparisons. Like, what in the world? Like, a cop went up there and just went back down the ladder. I mean, is it? I mean, none of us know what it's like to be in that situation. So maybe it's not fair to be like, "Are you kidding me?" But they're a law enforcement. Is it wrong to be upset? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It's not wrong to be upset. And I've been in 4 shootings as a cop where I was actually being shot at. So I can understand this perspective. But here's the thing is, one, if you're aware of what's going on and you know the guy that there has a gun, you're already anticipating that once he notices your presence, there's probably going to be a gunfight. So you have to mentally prepare for that. And once he started going up that ladder, you are now committing to that threat. So that means whatever he does, you have to commit to it. And one of the reasons I feel this way is when you look at and we've all seen kind of the diagrams that have been put out there from the shooter's location versus the counter sniper team's location. That means that when the cop chose to go up there and that counter sniper team is going to start getting ready to take a shot on him, you now become the backdrop of what that counter sniper team's looking at. Now, granted, these guys are the best of the best and they can hit a dime from that distance, but nonetheless, they see another fellow law enforcement in uniform up there. There's going to create hesitation, and that hesitation is what can lead to those shots getting fired before the counter sniper team responds. Now, that's speculation on my part because I haven't seen the information, but when I just look at this new information versus the way the spotter kind of popped up, looked back down, and then they engaged them, I'm kind of believing that this is probably when transpired. So it is very heartbreaking and is very disappointing that you had a Leo go up there and then instead of addressing the threat, because here's the thing, you're responsible for the people at this venue, in addition to a former president, current presidential nominee. So if you're going to go up there, then do your job. So, I don't know the man's experience. I don't know how long he's been doing the job, but regardless of whether it's his first day or his last day, you have an obligation to protect the public, even if it means your own life is lost in the process.
Now, you and me both have probably been reading a lot over the weekend, all of these different sources and things, and that's why I'm so glad to have you on the show, because you're someone I can ask about this next thing that I read. I've been reading that it's not protocol to engage the Secret Service. It's supposedly not protocol to shoot until shots are fired. That I find so hard to believe, especially when it comes to the president. Are you kidding me? Like, is that true?
I have a very I cannot subscribe to that being true. And it doesn't matter whether you're Secret Service or whether you're just a regular law enforcement officer or anything in between. Once you take the oath and you're given a firearm, if there is an immediate threat, you address that threat. There's no call for clearance. There's no, hey, can I take this shot? If there's a threat, you're tasked with dealing with that threat 100%. So for people to say that there's this SOP or there's a standard operating procedure that you have to wait until shots are fired to address it, I believe that's completely fabricated, because that doesn't make sense in any law enforcement environment. Now, that said, I do not know what the SOP is for the Secret Service's sniper team if there's a presence of danger but not an immediate threat. And what I mean by that is, let's say they see the guy walking on the roof and he has the rifle shouldered, so the barrel's up in the sky. He's not making any overt movements to position that weapon to attack someone. There might be an SOP there for clearance, but that's the only one that I can think of. But the second that suspect grabs that rifle and starts to make an overt movement, like he is going to use it, that's an immediate threat. And then you deal with that threat immediately. So if the Secret Service saw this gentleman, this terrorist, grabbing that weapon and start to move it, I cannot understand why a shot was not taken. So it's what point did they see this guy? Now, where was the weapon when they saw it is what my questions are for that.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to hear anybody saying anything about it being an inside job as a conspiracy theory. It is so fair to wonder, because there's too many things that don't make sense. Again, how do you bring in a ladder and nobody notices? It just doesn't make any sense. One more thing, there's a lot of people saying that additional security was called for and was rejected, and that they're making statements that's not true. What are your thoughts on that?
I believe he was. One of the things that we're hearing is that, and this was requested a long time ago, and it's because you have all these different charges that have been brought against President Trump in all these different states. So the logistics of getting them from these areas safely requires a lot of manpower. And so I believe that has a lot to do why this request for extra Secret Service, was requested by Trump and his team. Now, why would you deny that? And here's the thing, and I love Trump and I support Trump, but I understand he is a polarizing figure. So as a Secret Service, you have a responsibility for that. Whether you agree with his ideology is irrelevant, because you're tasked with a job to protect these people. And if you know this particular person is polarizing, this particular person is going to be doing all these travels to these different, court systems or jails, whatever the case may be, you have to provide that extra Secret Service, especially when we've seen how the DOJ has come after conservative America for posts and tweets and statements taken out of context. But remember what Johnny Depp said. Remember what Madonna said. Remember what Robert De Niro said. The redheaded comedian with the severed head. There has been so many calls for violence from people of notoriety who have millions of followers to not honor this man's request for extra Secret Service. I mean, how can you blame people for wondering there's more to this story than what they're telling us, or maybe even government involvement?
Except if that's the Secret Services he gets, then who needs them? But out of time. So where can people find your show?
Easiest way to find me is just go to alphawarrior.tv and you'll find everything Alpha.
alphawarrior.tv. Awesome. Such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks. It's been an honor.
Yep. All right. I'm going to wrap things up on the other side, but first, a quick word from our sponsors.
Sounds rolling. All 3 cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military. He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive? Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
All right. I just want to share that verse with you again that I started with. It is no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is from me, says the Lord. And I think that we have seen that in the case of Donald Trump. And I'm going to encourage you to continue to pray for a hedge of protection against any attacks against this man that does seem to be standing in the gap and protecting us from this tyrannical government. So please continue to pray for him. Please continue to pray that Jesus knocking on his heart ends up being a very true commitment to Jesus and following him. We saw radical changes in El Salvador happen when they committed to God, essentially. And the same thing can happen here. Our land can be healed. You can join me on my locals channel, ChristyLeeTV.locals.com, ChristyLeeTV.locals.com, and you can dig into God's word with me and prayer every morning, Monday through Friday at 7:30 Eastern. And let's just end with a little bit of a new song from Tom McDonald, You Missed, to round out the show.
They burning the country down with their progressiveness. It started with changing what gender is, then graduated to you're racist if you think that your life matters and your skin don't have melanin. They don't want peace, they want skeletons. They want men to pretend that they're feminine. They don't want an election, they got so offended by freedom that they just try killing the president. I used to think that the woke were misguided, but now I can see that they're evil. Twitter is angry that Trump isn't dead. You know who got shot? Innocent people.